across the roads.
All right, we're ready to go ahead and get started. Thank you to everybody who's here. I don't think we have anybody that has joined online, which is odd because we had several people online this morning that said they were going to get back online for the presentation. Maybe I'll jump on in a second. We're going to go ahead and we will start off with the pledge. And then Drew has volunteered to give us a prayer and a blessing on the food. And then I'll introduce our speaker. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Lord, thank you so much for allowing us to gather today. Lord, I ask that you open up the minds of everyone today to be able to learn something new about the profession. And I ask that you protect all our employees. I ask that you bless this food that we're about to eat, nourish our body and our body to thy service. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, so we'll have a presentation, and when the speaker is done, we'll go ahead and I think there are a few announcements, and then we'll grab something to eat. There's plenty for everybody. We have plenty, and even if we have a few more people up, and we have a few more people showing up. Awesome. We have a speaker today, distinguished speaker today. This is my boss, Deborah Lechner.
Has to say that.
Always fun to introduce them. I know. Let's see, what else flowery can I say? Talented. So Deborah is the owner and founder of Ergoscience. Ergoscience has been in existence for about 30 years now, branched off from some research when Deborah was a professor at UAB, and it is kind of grown into some different areas. We're in all kinds of different parts of the industry for safety and injury prevention, to the point of doing somewhere around 25,000 hire screens per year with different employers. But today, Deborah's going to speak a little bit more on some of the kind of emerging technologies that are helping folks in the safety business be more efficient, be more accurate, really do their job better without wasting a whole lot of time on it. So with that, I'll turn the time over to Deborah.
Thanks, I appreciate you all allowing me to speak with you today. Okay, alrighty. Justin's done a great job of introducing and giving a little bit of background on the company. And what I want to focus on today, our company, Ergoscience, and my background is focused on prevention of musculoskeletal disorders. And I think this is a really exciting time to be in that field because there's a lot of emerging technology and some new programs and some new twists on some programs that aren't necessarily new that I want to share. It's a small group, so I'd love to make it really interactive. So feel free to ask me questions. Point it here.
I know what's wrong.
Sit down. Yeah, right. Justin's already given the background of the company. Founded in 1992 when I was 10 years old. Fish, right? And I'm probably speaking to the choir here when I talk about the challenges with MSDs, and we all hear the figures that OSHA cites that an average MSD direct cost is within of a lost time in MSD is between 30 and 40,000, and you can kind of at least double that when you think about the direct cost, indirect cost. But what people don't think about a lot of times is how many dollars does our company have to generate in revenue to replace that amount of money that we had spent on that injury. And let's say if you have an average of a 3% profit margin, the company is going to spend around $3 million just to replace the lost revenue of that one injury. So when you think about injuries in those terms, it becomes even more of a profound economic impact than you really initially think. And then they also, of course, create high turnover. And one of the things is that most of the MSDs, or 30% of the MSDs, happen in new hires. And then because they're more likely to terminate within the first 60 days, if they experience a recordable injury, then you've got to replace them with another new hire who is also more likely to get injured. So it can be this vicious cycle of turnover due to recordable injuries. And then lost productivity because the staff, the remaining staff, picks up the slack, and they're stretched really thin. The quality of the work diminishes, employee satisfaction, and sometimes even customer satisfaction decreases. So it has a lot. MSDs, lost time injuries, have a lot of implications for your organization, as I'm sure most of you probably already know. And when we think about MSDs, we think about them in sort of like three major buckets. It's the physical abilities testing that can be done pre-hire or post-injury. Then job analysis and ergonomic assessment and training are kind of the second bucket. And then the third thing is work site or near site rehab or early intervention programs. So that's kind of the three general areas I'm going to be talking about today. And, one of the things that we find when we're helping organizations develop programs, injury prevention programs, is that the job analysis is really sort of the foundation of all the injury prevention programs that we do. And I'm just curious, with your organizations, how many of you feel like you have job descriptions that really give a good detail of the physical abilities of the work? And you're not alone. I mean, if an organization tells us, oh, we've got job analyses on all our jobs, we've got job descriptions, we pick it up, and there's usually very little about the physical requirements of the job. So that's why we really believe that doing this good job analysis, where you're actually going in and observing or videotaping, taking measurements of forces, heights, distances, is extremely important. And it can be used if you want to develop a physical abilities test. If you're making return to work decisions, how do you decide if somebody can go back given their restrictions if you really don't know the physical requirements of the job? And then the videos can be repurposed for some of the other programs I'm going to talk about. So I just think that that's an important beginning of setting a foundation for all your other injury prevention programs. And so we also have found that, as Justin said, we do a lot of pre-hire testing where we're testing the individual to see if their physical abilities meet the job requirements. And we do that pre-hire optimally, because really, if you don't have someone that has the basic physical abilities to do the job in the first place, then you're sort of starting at a deficit. Well, one of the challenges that we've seen evolve since COVID is this whole workforce shortage. How many of you all are experiencing challenges with hiring people? Yeah. So nobody wants to do a testing program that eliminates applicants. Everyone's so desperate for employees. So one of the things that we've worked with some companies on is called what we refer to as ramp in, or it's also kind of an onboarding process where the company tests everyone, but they hire everyone. And you can test them. You don't have to test them pre-hire. You can test them during the orientation. You can test them during the first week of being on the job. But identifying those whose abilities don't match the job requirements, that identifies your high-risk people. And then putting those folks in what we call a ramp-in program, where what they do is they go into a near-site clinic. If you have an on-site wellness center where there's exercise equipment, they can go in there and exercise, but they're doing strengthening and conditioning 3 times a week, and usually about 1 hour per session, and it lasts for approximately 2 to 3 weeks. We retest them at the end. We retest them at 2 weeks to see if they're ready. If they are, they go on to work. And then if not, then we keep them another week and retest again. And by the results that we've seen is that everybody improves their physical conditioning. And 80 to 90% of them achieve their job goals. So regardless of whether they've achieved their job goals, at least they're better fit to do the job than when they started. And companies that have done this with us, we've realized an 11-to-1 return on investment. Because, you know, because of the cost of one lost time injury, if you just save one injury by doing this, it's very worthwhile, both financially and from the perspective of the employee, because employees don't get any benefit from being injured in the long run. And another exciting technology that we've started to use this year that we really like is this computer vision AI ergonomics. And what this involves is that we can take a cell phone, videotape someone doing a hazardous task, and then upload it to software that overlays these limb segments on their body. They don't have to wear any sensors or markers or anything for this assessment. And you can blur the backgrounds, you can blur the person's face for privacy. And it will tell you, does this work as a pointer?
Yes. Actually.
Is it this?
Mhm.
Okay, there we go. So it'll give you an overall risk score for the task, and then some additional information about which body parts are really contributing the most to the risk. And there are 2 ways to use it. First is that you can do your ergonomic hazard assessments and develop recommendations from that. But we've also had a lot of success in using it to train associates in safe, better ergonomic work practices. When we're using it for hazard assessment, we analyze the hazardous test, and then we can identify and beta test a variety of different hazard controls, and then select and implement your best option, because the software will allow you to compare multiple conditions. So you might try one approach, see how much your hazard is reduced, your hazard score is reduced, try something else in comparison. When we incorporate it into assessment, we do our hazard analysis. We've got that objective score, implement controls, and then reassess. And then when we incorporate it into sort of safety materials handling audits, then we would use it to analyze the person's task that they're doing, quantify the risk, then recommend, hey, if you did it this way, if you bent your knees more in the lift, if you positioned your body a little bit more differently, then we might be able to lower the risk score for you. Then they do those work practices, you reassess it, and you can show them right then and there, look at the difference in your risk scores if you do it the correct way versus the incorrect way. And then come back, periodically reassess certain folks, additional recommendations if needed, and then periodically evaluate the outcomes. Now, Justin we've done a project with a major coffee manufacturer, and he might want to speak to some of the experiences he's had out in the field training these folks.
So I think most of you know I'm a physical therapist, and I've been doing this type of stuff for a long time, most of my career, but without the technology help. So you go on site, watch people do a job. You know, and typically what we would do is you observe, write down what you see as like hazardous activities or high risk activities, put it into a report, take it back to management. They get everybody in a class, say, okay, here's the hazardous things that we saw. Don't do this anymore. Don't do this anymore. Don't do this anymore. And so you do your education in the classroom setting. And I mean, and I've been in the classroom settings and you can see half the people are falling asleep while you're talking about it. The others are like doodling on something. Go back out on the floor and watch everybody go back exactly to what they were doing before you had the meeting. And of course, you know, the people that I did this with, I was in there because they were having high injuries. They weren't bringing in because they were never seeing injuries on the floor. You know, and for my interest, I treated their patients. So it wasn't like I wanted to help them get better, but it was no skin off my nose if they weren't getting better because I was getting paid to treat their patients. So the change that I saw with doing this is I'd go out on the floor with the people, and the company that I was working with, they had already identified what they felt like were their most hazardous jobs. And so I went out there and there was 5 separate jobs. And so I would talk with the person and say, hey, I do not work for Acme Coffee Manufacturing. I am not employed by them. What I'm trying to do is find ways to make your job easier. Do you mind if I videotape you for a little while to get some ideas? And everybody, after I explained to what I was doing and kind of showed them a couple of video clips, they're like, yeah, that's fine. Because people like to see themselves on video. And so I'd this could be like a 2 or 3 minute clip, take a clip of them, put in some parameters on the software, upload it, and this whole thing on the floor of the facility takes about 5 minutes. And I could bring it back and say, okay, so here's how risky your job is. And again, they'd already identified the risky job, so I knew it was going to be risky when I went in there. So it gives this risk assessment score. And then I would say, okay, so here's what you're doing. What if we change it to try this, try this, try this? Let me film you again. So we would do that, go back, rescore it, and see, of course, we would see a significant drop in the risk. I mean, because I know what I'm doing, I know what to tell them to do. And I can say, look, so if you do this, it drops your score by this much. Now, you might not feel a huge difference right now, but give it a couple of weeks and your fatigue when you go home will be significantly less. You'll have way less chance of injury. And again, people like seeing themselves on video. They were very interested when they could see, oh, that's me. So it's not some random example of somebody doing this task. It's not just corporate presenting to them, because as soon as you say corporate, they feel like, oh, this is them just trying to save money. It's not going to help my job. If it's a third party saying, I'm trying to help you feel better about your job, there was a lot of buy-in right there on the floor. And again, it didn't take time to go out and write reports and come back with them. And, you know, after they'd already forgotten what they were doing when we did the activity, this is like immediate. So it set in really quickly, and we had a lot of buy-in and very positive feedback for doing it right there. So I'm a huge one. Plus, I don't know how many of you have ever done like a RULA or a REBA calculation. It's a pain in the butt. It's time consuming. And seriously, this does it in like 2 minutes without you ever having to write anything down. It's just so much nicer. So I think for safety professionals in general, it's just a huge advantage to be able to do this. It's quick, it's easy, and you get better buy-in from the employees.
You don't have to put anything on them, got to put little
No
balls or
markers, nothing. You can even, like, while I'm videoing, I can start here and I can like go in a circle around them and get them at different angles. It can track them, like some of the things they were doing. They do it here for a second and then they go like kind of behind a pallet and come back, and it picks them back up, and it kind of guesses what they're doing behind the pallet, even just by where their head is. It's really sophisticated, and it takes like 90% out of the workout for questions.
So some of you guys are already doing it.
Yeah, we got it at the college. We've been up to a few places to do it. I haven't. I'm safety, but health consultants have. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, it's really neat.
Yeah, it is neat stuff. And this Justin just described, you know, there are 12 easy steps to using the software. It's a 5-minute process when you're on site with an employee. And so this is an example of some of the data fields you get. You get the overall risk score for the task as a whole, and then it'll tell you what body segments creating most of the risk. So in this particular task, this is a warehouse delivery person. They're trying to get this washing machine or dryer one out of the back of a van or truck. And you can see the poor body postures that he's using, and that comes a lot from the upper arm, the trunk angle, are really what is creating the risk here. And not only can you see it here, but the stick figure is color coded. So the most risky body segments are in red, the less are in orange, and the non-risky in green. And then it will tell you if you address this particular body segment, then you will most likely see a 16% reduction in the overall risk score. You know, what it doesn't tell you is how to reduce the hazard. And that's where the expertise of you guys as safety professionals and what we do at Ergoscience, that's where the expertise comes in. That's really important. And then here's an example of pre and post training. So started out with a very high risk, brought it down to a medium risk. And like Justin said, over the long run, just that difference can make a huge difference in the amount of strain that's in your body. Another example of really poor body mechanics, but the worker doesn't really have a whole lot of options because they're trying to reach down into a container. If that's moved and turned sideways so that they're reaching into that, it's a whole different level of risk. And so, you know, this is an example of how it might be used to change the work environment, not necessarily the worker. And again, pre and post change differences. And we've also done projects with organizations where we go out and train the trainers. So we'll start by going out, analyzing the hazards and getting a do's and don'ts sort of library started for them. And then train the safety managers or supervisors in using the software and allow them to practice under our supervision. And then we provide a help desk run into situations in the future that they're not sure about. They can call us and we periodically help them assess the outcomes. And I put that periodic reassessment, in bold, because this is something I think is really important, that anytime we implement an ergonomics program, a safety program, that we look at before and after injury incidences and costs. Because that's what helps management decide, do we want to continue to spend money on these kinds of projects and programs? And you can 9 times out of 10, the outcomes measures will dramatically show the dramatic improvements. And if they don't, then you have to start thinking, well, how can we tweak this? How can we do this better? So I think the outcome assessment is really key. And so using the computer vision AI to help teach the person and give them immediate feedback, but it's very seldom that somebody changes their body movements or the way they lift something with just one instruction, no matter how good that instruction is. It requires a lot of practice and feedback over time. And there's not enough of us, safety professionals, ergonomic professionals, PTs, to go sit on everybody's shoulder all day long. That's not realistic. But that's literally what these wearable sensors do, I believe, is to reinforce that good training that you've given them. And so there are a variety of these sensors on the market. We work with several companies, and some of them wear them in the middle of the back, some of them it's on the waist or chest. But what what these do is that they provide this real-time feedback. So they're set at a certain angle, let's say at 60 degrees. Once the person's body crosses that 60-degree mark, they get a vibration feedback. And you can track how they do over time. So they may start off spending a lot of time in these non-optimal positions. And then as they get feedback over time, they start to improve because they become more body aware. So we've seen some really great results. You can track. There's typically some kind of overall score that it gives. It's a compilation of usually of bending and rotating your back and twisting your back to the side, tipping your back to the side. And some of them, like this particular one, tracks not only the trunk angle, but it tracks the arm angle as well. And so it just depends on the types of jobs that you want, where you want to improve function, and the number of people that you want to wear the sensors as to which of the sensor companies is best.
Before anybody asks, we have already checked into like shock collars for feedback.
Read my mind, Justin.
Yes, we always have to define what haptic feedback is. So has anybody had experience with the wearable sensors? Have any of your companies used them? Do you have any feedback or comments? Yeah, like I said, we've worked with several organizations, and I think these are great tools to reinforce your training. And that's just an example. One of the companies that we deal with has a dock of 25 sensors. And that type of setup is usually best if you're going to have large numbers of folks wearing the sensors.
Some of the other stuff with that, with the wearable sensors, it's not only that they track like body movement and mechanics and stuff like that, but they can also do geo tracking and time sensitive tracking. So not only is it like this person is wearing the sensor and they're doing something that is, risky, but you can go so far as to say, every Thursday afternoon over in this corner of the warehouse, we keep getting these highlights. So what's going on over there that is causing all this to take place? So then it kind of tells you as a safety professional, where can I go put my eyes? Because I honestly, how many of you have ever gone onto a job site and seen somebody do something and you go, oh my gosh, what are you doing? And how long have you been doing that? So these are kind of like the multitude of extra eyes traveling around for you, because there's probably stuff going on that you have no idea, but these help figure that out. So then you go over to that spot and you watch and you go, oh, okay, I see what's happening now. We can address this immediately and change the behavior, change the engineering. We can make some change right here and then go back to tracking that over time and see how much did the risk decrease once we made these changes. So it tracks time, location. You can even, there's ways you can set it up to check how close it is to some other things. There's just a billion things you can track with these. And again, it's like having 50 of you walking around a facility because you can only be in one place at one time. And you may feel like you're paying attention to something that's really critical, and maybe you are, but there's other critical things that are taking place that you're blind to, and this kind of helps uncover that.
Another emerging trend is training with virtual reality. And this is, we personally do not have a lot of experience with it, just beginning to talk to an organization that's using it, but it's already being used a lot in workstation prototyping, because you can design a prototype without building, without the expense of building the prototype of the workstation in the virtual reality, and have the worker interface with that workstation setup. And then if you don't like things about it, you just change it virtually without spending thousands or millions of dollars. So I think that's a brilliant use of virtual reality. And then they're beginning some talks about doing ergonomic training using virtual reality. Not quite sure how it's going to work, but the good thing about it is the person's getting real-time feedback. Like with the haptic feedback, they're getting real-time feedback, and it's a sensory vibration. With this, it's the visual feedback real time. So it depends on how the person learns best, but I just want to put it out there as another option. And so I just created this little table that just shows the different benefits of the three. With the computer vision AI, you're getting the visual feedback, and it's immediate, but it is after the task is completed, and it requires someone to be videoing. With the wearable sensors, they get vibration feedback during the task, and you don't have to associate it with any videotaping. It can be time-stamped. And then the virtual reality, again, provides the visual feedback during the task. But one of the challenges is we don't really know quite yet how that's going to work. It's an emerging technology. The other thing that we have found very successful is doing what's called early intervention programs for MSDs. And are any of y'all working in environments where you all are using that as an intervention strategy? So how this works is that employees self-identify when they're first beginning to feel some discomfort before it becomes this full-blown injury recordable issue. You know, typically there's a continuum where people start out feeling, let's say it's a shoulder, they'll start out feeling fatigued at work in that shoulder, then it starts to become uncomfortable, then it leads to real full-blown pain and a recordable. So the early intervention programs are trying to intervene right after the person starts feeling the initial discomfort. And these programs are typically performed by a physical therapist or a physical therapist assistant, an athletic trainer. Sometimes companies have used a massage therapist, and there's no real physician. The physician doesn't have to refer them to the program. They just self-identify. The clinician sees them in either. I really like it if it's on-site, but not all organizations are set up that way and allow for on-site. So we have done it in near-site clinics. Really improves, not only does it prevent injuries, but we've seen it have a great effect on productivity. And what it is that they go into, or the clinician works with them and does superficial heat or cold, like a hot pack, cold pack. We can do massage of the body part, non-rigid supports, and what we've used primarily is kinesiotaping. So I'm sure you all have seen the athletes with the sports tape. And that is a really great intervention because it lifts the skin up. It allows them to still be mobile, but it promotes the circulation to the body part, and it's really great stuff. And then while we've got them there, we can also provide the ergonomic advice and training, talk to them about, so what is it about your job that you're doing when you start to feel this shoulder bothering you? And then coach them a little bit on how to position their body, how to do their job in ways that minimizes the stress. And that's where the computer vision AI can come into play, is during that ergonomic advice. And you can ask them, we have asked them to wear a sensor so that we see, how much of the day they're spending with their arm elevated. And when we do these programs, one of the concerns that employers have sometimes about doing them is that, will this convert all these folks into a recordable? No, because this is in compliance with OSHA first aid, right? these three things are listed by OSHA first aid as or by OSHA as first aid interventions, and then the ergonomic advice is totally separate. 80% of our participants significantly decrease pain and improve function and don't become a reportable injury. The other, 20% are probably going to become a reportable anyway, or they enter the program and they're already to the point of being past a discomfort and into a full-blown injury. And then just in conclusion, I'd like to say, the technology is amazing and it really allows us to do our jobs more efficiently and with more accuracy, we get more, I don't know how I'm trying to say, more detail. We can
Activity.
yeah, objectivity and finer data points. And that can really go a long way towards injury prevention of MSDs. But there has to be some expertise in knowing how to take the information that technology gives you and translate that into MSD prevention. And that's where I think we as safety professionals and ergonomists and physical therapists can come in and really put the two together, help organizations put the two together. So I think it's a very valuable role that we play. If you just pass out sensors and you don't track and you don't look at the data, what good is that going to do? So I just think there's a huge role that we can play, and we have, today we have more sophisticated tools than we used to. So I think it's a very exciting time to be in safety. And so that's all I have, and I'd like to open it up for any additional questions that you might have.
Thanks, Joe Schultz. Have any of the sensors been used in a post-injury standpoint to maintain work restrictions, where the position's given, just to kind of watch the employee, make sure that we're not violating them in any kind of way?
Well, we have not had experience in that, but that's a very interesting thought.
One of the limitations right now with the sensors is they can't, so typically when we get restrictions back from an MD, it says don't lift over 10 pounds, don't lift over 20 pounds. One of the things that the sensors can't track is force. Like they can see, like if one of the restrictions was no overhead reaching, it can certainly track that. No bending, whatever, it can track that. It can't track if somebody's picking up 20 pounds or 30 pounds. And that's frequently what my injured workers were chomping at the bit to get back on the line and be able to do that stuff. And we're kind of having to pull the reins and say, no, remember, you're not doing that for another couple of weeks. So I think in some occasions you could use, I haven't heard of it being used that way yet, but you could, but not for the tracking of, are you lifting too much? So
Like a shoulder injury, no overhead lift.
yes, that you definitely,
Right here, but you can't raise your arm up. Do you use it for something like that?
you could, except for, it takes, with both of them, you have to be able to collect the data from the sensors. So it wouldn't be an immediate feedback type of thing to be able to, unless you're getting it real time and you have somebody run out there and smack him on the hand and say, typically that's more of a role for the supervisor to say, look, I know if I put you on this job, the likelihood is there that you're going to be doing overhead lifting. So I'm not going to put you back there until we have the restriction lifted.
What about movement speed based on that range of motion?
That's interesting because some of them do, all of the sensors, they kind of track differently. Some of them track velocity, some of them track acceleration, some of them track, all kinds of different things. So I would imagine that there is a way that you could track how vigorously they're doing certain things.
And that could be in addition to how much power.
Right.
I think some of the sensor companies are working on trying to develop some sort of algorithms and ways to figure out how to estimate the weight they're handling from the sensors, but I don't think we have it so far. Any other questions?
You said you're just getting into the virtual reality and looking at that, and I agree, it's great for workplace design, that and redesign, that type of stuff, but has anybody used that for just, just for tracking and that type purposes and training? And are you getting any pushback on it? I've heard a few folks pushing back on that. Specifically, I won't be generationally stereotypical here, but older workers don't like the VR type stuff. I'm just curious if anybody's used that or if you've heard any of that. We've looked at some of our stuff too. We're not sure yet if we want to go that direction or not.
Yeah. And our experience so far, again, is just talking to the VR experts who they're very interested in implementing it in the workplace. Not sure exactly how it's going to work.
One of the really interesting things we've talked about VR wise, just one of the ideas that came up is, can you test somebody to see, are they afraid of heights? Because how do you test that in a normal setting, like in a clinic? I mean, stand on this box like that doesn't test for heights, but you can put somebody in VR and make them feel like they're standing on the top of a telephone. And I don't know how many of you have actually used VR stuff, but they can make it realistic enough that you're on that and you're going, oh gosh, and you feel like you're going to fall off. So that's one of the things we had somebody talk to us about. Could you test for that? Now, there's a difference with being able to test for that and being able to select out for that. Like, I don't know that you'd ever legally be able to say, you can't have this job because you're afraid of heights. That a person might self-select out because there's no freaking way I'm getting up on top of the telephone because I felt like this. But yeah, there's some really interesting ideas with it. Confined spaces, heights, some of these things that it might be difficult to test for in an office environment, but you could do it completely safely with the VR stuff. So
I've got some experience with it too. We've used the computer vision AI in a different automotive industry that I was in. And one of the hardships we had in like our assembly lines was making those areas modular. So by having a modular assembly line, that allowed us to be able to make the changes that popped up on the skeleton that would turn red and changing those hazards that are associated with it. The the virtual reality part of it should allow you to spend less money on making big changes if you don't have that level of modularity that you need to change a small bit of minutia.
It's really true. Comments, good thoughts, questions. Anyone else?
all right. Well, thank you so much, Deborah, for coming and presenting this to us. Great topic. And I'll turn the time over to Vincent or Darren.
Yeah, so just a couple of quick announcements from our executive meeting this morning, and then a couple of emails that I saw come in. So we're going to try to get a survey out in the next 2 weeks. It's circulating already. Vincent sent back notes from a previous survey. We tried to do this last year and we lost a little ground and traction. We're going to try to bring that back and hopefully have a survey out. It'll be short and sweet, so it should be directed to the point. So please pass the word to your other members and peers to please. We want to get as much feedback as we can. It'll be short, sweet, direct. We know how many surveys you guys get, and we're not trying to overwhelm you with another one, but we need some feedback to see where this group is going forward and how we can best serve the membership. So just be looking for that. I would say early March, you should see something come out from Paul. And the couple of other things, we acknowledged, many of you may know her or not know her, but we acknowledged Allison Short, which is part of our WISE group out in the Montgomery, Auburn section. She actually works for Auburn University, but she's been a real go-getter in the last year and done a lot of great things for that Auburn Montgomery section and for the Alabama chapter in terms of WISE. And she continues to grow. She's got a couple of articles, I guess that's in the EHS Advisor, isn't that right? And then she was also, if you guys follow the podcast that Abby Ferry was on, Abby had to step to the side. And this is from up north, but that podcast is so well known in the in the EHS realm. And Abby Ferry had to step to the side, and Allison Short has stepped into that role with the other two podcasters. So she's getting a lot of FaceTime right now, but it's good. She brings a lot of energy and she brings a lot of good topics. So Vincent, what else are we forgetting here?
Region 4 PDC.
Yeah, so the Region 4 PBC is in April. And it'll be in Tuscaloosa. So start making plans to attend that if you haven't already. It's a very reasonable conference. It's going to be fairly local, I think, for every one of us that are here. And so be looking for some email communication on that as well, and plan to attend that. Do you know the exact dates?
26 and 27.
26 and 27.
If you attend as a chapter member or section member, we need moderators for the sessions. So we'd be happy if you volunteer to moderate a session on 1 or 2 of the days.
Couple of other things. We're going to do this internal at first, but we're going to society to ask for them to run some reports, find out how many of our members are also involved in the practice specialties and in the common interest groups like WISE and BISE and emerging professionals, so that we can potentially reach out to those groups and see what their interests are specifically. And this is all about driving additional engagement and trying to bring membership back in and improve these meetings. So as soon as we get that information from society, then we should be able to dissect it. So those groups may get some specific emails, questions, things like that. And then the last thing was an email came in from Wayne Jackson. Let's see here. He sent it just a few minutes ago. That was the professional development conference. Well, he mentions in here, and we talked about this in our executive meeting, but he mentions in here about updating the bylaws. But we're going to work on that as soon as the new year rolls around. So does anybody have any questions or comments?
One more thing, University of Alabama, OSHA, United Rentals, I'm sorry, City of Tuscaloosa, May 10th, excavation trenching event. We're gonna put together an event where we teach you a little bit about excavation and trenching to prevent fatalities in those types of situations. We had a fatality 3 years ago over in Hoover, was it? Yeah, with a trenching. Then 2 weeks later, they had one in Orlando, Florida as well. So that'll be May 10th in the morning. Be half day event roughly.
And on trenching, last year, there was a significant increase at the beginning of the year in trenching fatalities within the country. And it's happening all the time. There's been a national emphasis program, local emphasis program on trenching since the 80s, since I was 5. And this stuff it's something that's out there. At this point, if you're doing it wrong, it means you, to me, I mean, it's negligence. I mean, you know better. And you know, we had a co-show out on a compliance officer out on a site. I was telling these guys, I was telling Tom, we had a co-show out on a site to doing a separate audit last week or the week before. Look, she looked across the road. There was a trench there with a bunch of people, and there was a ladder in the trench. She goes over and looks at it. It's a 5.5 foot deep trench, and there's people in it with no protection. And it's oh yeah, by the way, it's class 3 soil or class C soil, excuse me, which y'all know is the worst kind. So I mean it could have happened real quickly, and could have been
They
bad.
died in Hoover. The trench box was on $40 a day. That's all it costs. And they died not putting the trench box in.
Craziness. But I've already reached out to Luca. If y'all don't know who that is, it's the Alabama Utility Contractors Association. NUCA, the National Utility Contractors Association, is the primary for the trench safety stand down week. There's one going on in April, May timeframe, I think. But Luca is very interested in being a part of more trenching and excavation stuff. There's huge infrastructure program going on. The state of Alabama just got awarded a bunch of money for water and all that in South Alabama. There's a huge infrastructure going on, if y'all don't know that. So we're going to see upticks in trenches being done. So we need to start getting this stuff out quick. And that's a big one from OSHA. Another big one from OSHA is warehousing. If y'all know anybody in the warehousing industry, I am trying to put together something for warehousing, but Amazon and Dollar General, which Dollar General I understand, but Amazon and Dollar General has basically told me to kick rocks. I mean, they don't want to work with nobody. I'm just not getting anybody from that warehousing industry to really do much, but I mean, we've got a major emphasis on that, and you guys are even, I mean, Ergonomics is big in the warehousing. I mean, I think Amazon just got fined a lot up in New York and Florida for Ergonomics.
What are you hoping to do in terms of warehousing?
I want to get together, I want to get a group of warehouses together, let's start working on training, identification of hazards, I mean, it's just, what can we do? And heck, at the end of the day, let's get a group of people to sit down and say, what do you want? You know, I mean, because if we get multiple people together to work on stuff and we start pushing stuff out, I mean, we need to get PIT training out, PIV, industrial vehicles, forklifts. We need to get that training out. We need to get ergo training out. We need to get all this stuff. I mean, I've read so much about Amazon and how they wear their employees out. I mean, it's just the walking, the amount of stuff, people run about 15 miles a day or something, just walking in these Amazon warehouses sometimes. So I'm just trying to, that's at the end of the day, I just want to get a group of people together and let's talk. What can we do? What do you want to do? And then, okay, well, what are you willing to do? And what's OSHA willing to do? Because I mean, I can get an alliance signed and I can get OSHA, big OSHA to say, yeah, Jason can provide this and this. So that there's stuff that we can do. It's getting people's buy-in, you know? So that's one. Another thing I'm working on right now is mental health awareness. Myself, I like to say I'm not necessarily an impatient person, but I'm kind of a person where I grew up in the Army, so I'm kind of high op tempo. Every day is a new mission, right? And I'm trying to get these things established, but there's that hurry up and wait piece, and it's driving me nuts. So I need a mental health alliance right now. But no, I'm
To our lives.
So I do have a big talk with myself, my counterpart down in Mobile. If you guys don't know Francisco Garcia down in the Mobile area, he works with the ASSP down there. He's my counterpart, the compliance assistant specialist for OSHA. He and I work very closely together. We're working with the Alabama Department of Mental Health, the Alabama Department of Public Health. Same thing, we're getting with them. We're saying, okay, what do you want to do? And then we're also going to possibly bring in the Associated Builders and Contractors. Safe State's already said they want to come in. Safe State wants to get in with the warehousing thing too. And so we're going to bring this in and we're going to start trying to push out mental health awareness. It's important, people. I mean, COVID has destroyed people's minds. I mean, this stuff is really bad right now. And it's near and dear to my heart. I've had some, we've had conversations in other meetings. But that stuff's near and dear to my heart. So I want to get something together so we can start pushing out more information. Heck, I mean, I've even got a group that work with cops to work with the police force, which is another, they got all kinds of stress.
I heard an interesting, and I don't know if this would be of any resource for you, but I heard an interesting thing on NPR yesterday morning where they are it's a private company that's developing it, but they've developed chat bots for people who have mental health issues, and the chat bot talks to the person, and then there are some algorithms that if the person expresses certain things, they triage that to kind of a live person because they believe the person's in crisis. And they had a woman on the radio program that said, hey, I was really, I was very, what do you call it, skeptical at first because I didn't think chatbots. I want a real therapist, but I can't afford a real therapist. So, she went along with the chat bot, and she was expressing that it really, and ultimately she had been really helped. So,
awesome. Yeah.
And these other, there are other, mental health groups that it's online. So at least it becomes more accessible for people.
That's part of the problem, right? So not to put too much of my personal business out on the street, and especially with my daughter, she's a teenager, but my daughter, she's got some things going on, and we can't find a child psychologist. It's almost impossible to find one. And when you do, they're booked up out
You're booked up
God
and
knows how long.
$150 to $200 an hour and
That's it.
insurance does not cover it.
It's horrible. And, you know, she's coming to us saying, hey, I need to see somebody, I need to see somebody. But other than taking her to children's and throwing her in an emergency room or something, I mean, what do you do? I mean, it's like, good night, this child just needs to talk to somebody. You know, and, we did, but now we are up in Athens, so we're in the hunt for it.
Just to say Impact in Birmingham does do that sort of, they take in. Both my children go to Impact on their own, but there was a time when we were years ago when I had no income and getting divorced, all that kind of stuff. And they took us in and it was like, I had to come in every week, but they were willing to do a sliding scale and all that. And they do individualized matching the therapist with the child based on whatever the. I don't know if Impact has connections, but you might call Impact and see if there are connections because it is an altruistic, yeah, it's out there for people that need it, that can't do some of these things. We're just saying, just so you know, and it's adults too.
You know, one of the things, I don't know if it's because our generation didn't talk about it, or if it's because there's something going on that's creating more issues, but these children today are talking about it. It is, a lot of it is that, it's that
Yeah.
self-diagnosing, I think a
Yeah.
lot of it too,
They
but
can't get away from it.
yeah,
They have
Having
anxiety,
issues at school.
anxiety's
anxiety's huge.
out of control. And it's, I mean, it's something that's sad. And here's the problem. So we are having issues with the workforce now, but who's the next part of that workforce?
Yeah. it's the
And
kids.
when these teenagers coming up and oh my God, it's gonna be bad, folks. I mean, if we don't get this nipped in the bud now, and I don't know exactly, I'm one person and I'm hoping that I can get some of that ADPH and all them, but I mean, it's scary. It's very scary. So anyway, I brought that up. The other thing I'm working on is Struck By. If you guys remember, there was a Struck By Alliance. There used to be a big Struck By Alliance. It kind of fell by the wayside. We're reinvigorating that. Francisco, my counterpart's working with AGC down in the Mobile area to get that restarted. So we will have that up and running. We have a meeting with them for too long. So we're gonna get that pushed up and start running again, because that's a big one that was brought up in the ABC meeting was we had some issues with people getting hurt on the roadways. Again, infrastructure, we're gonna have more people on the roadways. So be proactive and start pushing and getting this stuff started before we start getting more people out there.
Hey, I don't know if you know
Meeting.
Melissa, is it Melissa with y'all at Safe State? What the bonds?
Oh, well, it's fine.
Yes,
It doesn't work for us, but she is one of the trainers we use out of
her road safety course.
Yeah.
He's really, really, really good.
He's really big into the Struck By and
Yes.
construction road.
Melissa Bonds.
Yeah, Melissa Bonds.
I don't know, I saw her.
She's out of Ozark.
I don't think she told us.
Ozark, yeah, down by Fort Rucker.
I know where that is. That's the worst place. I'm just kidding. Mentioning it in PTSD and mental health. That area down there is, I tell people all the time, that's one level off of hell.
It's very heartfelt and important. So she
That's
does
good, yeah.
an amazing job.
I will definitely put that. And who, does anybody have information? Tom, you do?
Yeah, I'll send you her information.
So does anyone else have any information that they want to share or any announcements?
Where the government conference, I saw they've got a call for speakers that's out, asked for a presentation to be in by the 30th, and I think it's meeting it's the 14th of next month, I think, something like that.
That's in September, right?
So, yeah,
End of October,
End of October?
end of August, I'm sorry.
End of August.
29th, 31st is the governor's conference this year.
So, anybody that's looking to speak or be interested in speaking, get that in, that'd be great, that helps the planning committee.
I hear that's a really good conference, but I haven't been fortunate enough to attend yet.
Horrible place to go that time of year.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Every time you say you want to go there at that time of year, your boss looks at you like.
Kind of like the conference in Vegas, right? Yeah.
I don't know if all of you guys know, but Ramona Morris has retired. Did y'all know that? Okay, so Ramona Morris retired on the 31st of December. So currently there is no sheriff in town. We have an acting sheriff. I say sheriff, but area director right now for the OSHA office, we do have an acting. We do not know when we will have an actual AD. I am thinking mid-February, but I could be wrong. I do not know who that person will be. I don't know if they're coming outside the region, in the region,
Right.
and I want to know because that's my boss too. So, yeah. Yeah, I really, I'm gonna tell you what, I love working for Ramona. If anybody, any of you, you guys know Ramona, she is Ramona, she was a phenomenal boss. And so it was sad, I was sad to see her leave. I only got to work for her for about 9 months. But whoever our new one is, I'm sure they'll bring somebody up. But I'll let you guys know next time if we have somebody in, but
They're filling in.
Lisa Strunk is the current, but I heard that she's only there until the end of the month. And then they're gonna swap, it might be Ed Grabowski next. Until we get that next person. So just letting y'all know, currently Ramona's not in town. She's out.
She's enjoying the next endeavor.
Yes, yes, she is. And I know she was super excited about it, but it kind of came on quick. But yeah, just so you know.
Anyone else before we close? All right.
Let me say something. We have, I don't know
Why
if
don't you close it, Vincent?
I don't know if you've seen the little cup that we had that apparently Justin has in his office. With the white cup with
Yeah, it's somewhere in.
ASSP on it. You might have seen it. Well, generally, we hand those out to our speakers and we're very proud of it. So, so I forgot to bring it today. But we'll make sure you get one. So just wanted you to know that we appreciate
He's
you.
got one.
That's right.
Volunteer, let you have mine.
So we'll be sending it along. Lunch, people.
Thank you all.
You.